think we're going to get through it, though.
I
we're
think
going to get through
so.
it because you're a real producer. You produce for Tim Pool, like hundreds and hundreds of IRL episodes. So if anyone can make it through the roller coaster that is my live streams with shoddy internet, with devices that seem to hate me, with the fact that, let's be honest, I dyed my hair blonde for 25 years in television. Well, 15 in television and 10 because I don't know why outside of television. And there's a lot of bleach that seep through my pores. So I'm just going to blame it on that. And I'm doing the best I can. And Lydia is here to help us. Okay. You know what, Lydia, before I read my Noble Gold ad, which thank you to Noble Gold for sponsoring me, despite the fact that I run this what do we call fly by night operation. I get amazing guests, but they are willing to come on with the fact that I'm using a paper box basically to broadcast from. Run us back through, why do you go by Sour Patch Lids? Because that's how everybody seems to know you.
We just were eating Sour Patch Kids at the time a lot, and Tim was complaining about how they burned his mouth, so he quit eating them. I loved them. I was like, well, my former nickname was Lids. That's really the only thing you can turn my name into. So I said that rhymes with kids. Good enough for me. See if we can get some copyright infringement going on, and so far so good.
Okay. So that's how I asked to find you, through Larry Sharp, our mutual friend, former gubernatorial candidate in New York, libertarian, very nice guy, also has a podcast. Go check him out. And I was like, I need to talk to Sour Patch Lids. I've been meaning to contact you for a long time. And we titled this, I Quit Tim Pool Over Civil War, or something like that. She quit Tim Pool over Civil War. And it's not even clickbait. It's actually true. I just want to go over to locals real fast and just thank everybody for being on my editorial board. Thank you to folks who stick with me and are slowly building the funds to have more than a paper box to broadcast from. But Wells Mortensen says, all I got from part 1 was visit morrowgold.com or there will be a civil war. So I visited.
Save the world. So, thank you.
Okay. Before I go into that though, okay, Lydia, give us the 30-second tease for what Civil War has anything to do with why you left Tim Pool. And then we're going to get into the details.
Yeah. So this wasn't the main impetus, but this was very much a feature in our conversations at Timcast IRL, which was fine. It was great. I loved having those conversations. I loved meeting everyone, but I felt like we needed to take a more positive approach to kind of discussing what people consider to be a pending kind of civil conflict. And the other part of that too was that we wanted to be close to family because we figured that was a very important part of forestalling this actual possible civil conflict we thought we might be facing. So we made that move for two different reasons, and we're now closer to family and more positively focused. Although I'm really grateful for everything I got to do at Timcast, I also like having a lot more positive focus in my life.
That must mean you like your family.
Yes, I do. I love my in-laws. They're wonderful people. Even though they do live in a blue city, everyone in the city is wonderfully nice. They are very progressive, but I do think it's good for us to see progressivism firsthand so that we kind of understand it and can come to terms with it and push back against it. I think that's important to do.
It's interesting because we have a connection. I went to Boston University for my master's degree, and it was back in 2000. When did I start? 2003 to 2004 to 2007. And it was the very beginning of what I saw kind of in grad school, they would call it querying ideology, querying politics, querying as in QUEERING, but sometimes there's a querying, questioning.
Ask a question, right?
Yeah. And it was interesting because I noticed that if you ask questions in some of my classes, it was very chilling to think that you were going to be called any number of things for asking a particular question, trying to learn in a classroom. But it wasn't a trend at that point. But I remember very clearly seeing the beginning of where we are now, which is you get screamed off campus and everything if you have a perspective that has been determined to be any number of the isms. Okay, Lydia, before we get into the Civil War talk, thanks again to Noble Gold, like I said, for sponsoring my videos, despite the fact that in the middle of this ad read, need, I might end up getting bumped out, but then Lydia's going to tell you how to support her. Okay. So, as I have said before, if you are interested in diversifying into precious metals and you want to support my work, all you have to do is go to morrowgold.com or call 877-646-5347 and ask some questions. You don't even need to sign up. Just go ask them some questions about transferring your IRA over to gold or silver. If that's something you've been interested in, we've had bank runs, we have inflation, we have people concerned about the housing market, about the economy generally speaking. And a lot of folks have been considering diversifying into precious metals. And if you're one of those people, this is a great opportunity for you to support my work and also get your questions asked and answered. This is a company that has been in business over 2 decades. They have almost 5 stars with the Better Business Bureau and Consumer Affairs. And also, if you sign up and your IRA qualifies, you get a 5-ounce American the Beautiful coin. Gold, they say, is one of the most stable assets outside of government control. That's what Noble Gold says. So if you're one of those people, like I said, who has been interested in this and you want to support my work, why wait? Go do it. Go over to morrowgold.com, 877-646-5347. And again, as I read before, this is not financial advice. Well, I'm going to put it back on the screen. There is always a risk when investing, and there are no guarantees of any kind, because if there is, in fact, a civil war, I've been told also that the FDIC will throw me in jail. Okay, no, let's just hopefully not going to happen. But let's get back to the topic at hand. Since we were talking about this, as you said, it was a regular theme when you were producing for Timcast IRL. I think he still brings it up quite a bit. A lot of people are talking about that.
Exactly. I know. I understand why.
So, okay. So how do you think that became a topic of discussion, both for Timcast IRL, but also just generally? Like, do you think that organically came up as an idea? Like, I've had anarcho-capitalists on that are all about that idea, I guess. But wouldn't I say, like, think that they're repeating some kind of CIA propaganda? But there are other people who would say, yeah, that just was kind of inserted in the narrative to put people against each other and get folks scared of each other and sort of, wanting to dissolve the United States of America. And it's a purposeful propaganda tactic, I guess, by the powers that be to create chaos and thereby to come in with control. How does it enter the Timcast IRL conversation? And then just generally speaking, how do you think we started talking about this?
So I think it entered the Timcast sphere by dint of looking just at the polling that was talking about how people really don't agree with each other. And not only do they not agree with each other, they disagree with each other so deeply that a lot of times they feel like they can't live near, well, they certainly can't date people they disagree with politically. They could never consider planning or having a family with someone they don't agree with. And the divisions are just clearly very deep. I think we gathered that from a lot of that polling information, which is still there. But after I left Timcast IRL shortly, there was a really interesting new polling that came out. And one of the numbers that stood out to me was that 81% of Americans polled in this poll, again, not everyone, said that they did not think that politics was a good way to judge whether or not someone's a good person. And for me, that was incredibly uplifting, because I was like, that means, it sounds to me like you were saying just a second ago, this might have been some form of propaganda, whether it was from people in either party who want to divide the US further, or maybe it's coming from someplace like China, because we know that China has the 10-cent army that they send to seed all kinds of ideas, and they do want the US divided. Like, they want a weak America, and they've been using TikTok very well for that end. So we can see them using that technology. I think that it could be a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, but I think that the polling seems to indicate that people are kind of moving away from each other. And also, there's a very good chance that it could be kind of like a political move on the part of some of our global enemies. So maybe a little bit of both.
You said in your Substack, which, before we go any further, why don't you just tell people how they can follow you now that you're doing stuff on your own?
Yeah, so my Substack is my first name, my last name, Lydia Leitermann, Leitermann, at substack.com, excuse me. That sounds like an email address. And then also on Twitter at SourPatchLids. That's the same for my YouTube channel. I don't write too much on my Substack. I tend to upload podcast formats over there because I do a show every day. That's a lot of fun. and they have a really neat podcast function. So that's where you guys can find me.
That's pretty amazing that you're doing it daily. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I enjoy it. And I've been talking to people lately. Really, really interesting conversation. I hope to have this afternoon too. I'm loving what you're doing here as well, because these conversations are what we really, really need to kind of bring us together. I was going to say cohere, but I'm not sure if that's a real word. Bring us into more coherent function with each other, and hopefully pass on some of our ideas to each other.
I'm sure you've heard this before. What do you say to the person who's like, maybe there's nothing good that comes out of trying to unify when there is significant problems with a particular, I guess, ideology that's being, some people, I guess, would say, being sort of forced upon others. They're like, I can't compromise with you. I can't compromise. I don't have any choice but to walk away. I mean, we do that in conversations, right? Sometimes, like, we try to have a conversation, but eventually maybe you get to a point where the person's yelling at you, or like somebody comes up and, screams at you. You're in Boston. I mean, that happens all the time, right? You don't just necessarily like sit there and take it. Is there a point where you would say, no, I can understand why Americans would believe that, there's just no working it out? In other words, could the division be seen as a functional response to a dysfunctional way of being? Like, if you were to leave an abusive relationship or something like that.
100%. So what we saw with Chris, Billboard Chris, up in Canada a little while ago, he was just having a conversation. He was talking to a reporter, and this activist came up to him and just started screaming at him, drowning him out. I just watched this video yesterday, and it's distressing because Chris is just having this conversation. He's being drowned out. He's trying to convey his own ideas. This person comes up, starts audibly overwhelming him, and then physically attacks him and basically drags him away. Incredibly disturbing. In an instance like that, I think it's fair to say there are absolutely things that should be a red line. My audience knows, and I think anybody who ever watched me on Timcast IRL knows really well, I'm pro-life, and that's something on which I never intend to compromise. That's just my line in the sand. Now, I know that in order to make progress there, we have to kind of compromise our way there, which is great. That's fine. Willing to accept that. But I think that, yes, there are limits, but I think that we should also be working on trying to find a way to make this work. The other thing I've been noticing too is that I think that there's going to be a natural sort. I know Gavin Newsom has been going down to Florida, not his state, and pointing out all the problems in Florida, completely neglecting all the issues in his own dystopian state. And I saw something earlier today that was really interesting to me that said that a majority of parents of queer children said that they would like to leave Florida. And I thought that is really interesting, because that to me says that if you make a state sufficiently free, there's going to be a subset of people who don't want to be there. We view freedom as a huge gift, but some people don't. Some people view it as like some kind of burden, especially if people they don't agree with are also going to be free. And I just can't help thinking that that natural sort is going to be how it shakes out. I think that's fine. I think that's maybe the way it should be. It's not violent. Could be the best way to go.
Okay. PH Joy says, I just want to see if she can be real about Lydia.
What is real?
I think she's being real. I think she's telling us what's really going on. I wonder, do people think that Timcast is a show? Is that why they ask those questions? Like, do they think that it's kind of staged, or is it real? And maybe could you comment on that? Like, are the conversations organic, or how much did you talk about what you were going to discuss? Like, how much was just kind of came up, and how much was like, this is the path we're going, and we need to talk about this stuff because it's clicks versus its genuine interest for the topic at hand?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that people kind of fail to understand that that was a real show full of real humans. I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a show that we actually had to stop in the middle of because Ian said something relatively unwise that totally violated YouTube's terms of service. That was real. There was also another more recent instance toward the end of my tenure there where we had a guest who said something really inflammatory and we just had to cut it. We were like 5 minutes into the show. That was real. Like we had a skeleton crew. Basically, we had me and Tim and Ian, sometimes Luke, sometimes Seamus, and we are millennials doing millennial things, doing the best we can. We had high standards for what we talk about. We would sometimes be like, oh, that's going to get a lot of attention. Like Joe Rogan is always a real magnet for eyes. But I personally feel like Joe Rogan plays a really important role in our society. He's like the normal guy saying normal things. And I think that if that resonates with people, that's great. I had no issue with that. But yeah, it was very real. And I feel like when people say be real, they mean be unprofessional, and I'm not going to be unprofessional. I've always been super professional. I've been working since I was like 17, and I worked working class jobs. I was a nurse aide for quite a long time, and a tech in a cardiology unit. So I know what it's like to work, but I also know what it's like to be professional. And I was never fired for any reason because I was respectful and made sure that I was, being mature about how I interact with other people. So, but yeah, Timcast IRL, very real. We made mistakes for sure, but very fun too.
Okay, let me go back over to locals real fast. Cohere is indeed a verb free to use under first. Big shout out to my most favorite long-haired person off Timcast.
Thanks.
Third person singular present coheres. If
I
the
love
different elements of a piece of writing, a piece of music, or a set of ideas cohere, they fit together well. Okay, we've answered that question.
Beautiful.
Let's talk about this, Lydia. We were talking before we went live about how it seems like a lot of folks say they don't like clickbait and the anger and division and polemic, but honestly, the good news gets less clicks. It just does. I've noticed that if I do happy solution-based videos, they get far less views than ones where it seems like the end is near. Well, what do you think's up with that? Why do people like such negativity? And then also, why do they think that they don't like negativity? I mean, give me the answer to both of those. Both
Sure.
Why they do like it and why they don't seem to understand that they do like it.
So I think our negativity bias is biologically rooted. I think this is also the reason that we remember our bad experiences, our embarrassing experiences much more than we remember the good experiences. Like this is what wakes us up at 2 a.m. and like prevents us from going back to sleep. We're like, oh my gosh, I remember when I was 12 and I said this really embarrassing thing. That's because when humans were coming along in development, it was very important for us to remember the negative things. And we were okay forgetting the good things because remembering the negative things was going to be what kept us alive. Now, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but that makes great sense to me. And I think that people deny that, this bias toward negativity, because it's kind of unflattering, right? We would like to think that we can be more focused on the positive, but the truth is that we do focus on the negative, and that is what gets the clicks and the likes and the attention because we're always kind of on high alert. And I think that we don't crave that chaos and disaster, but we pay attention to it because it just seems maybe more important to us. Whereas a solution, we're like, yeah, whatever. It's going to be soothing. It's going to be some kind of pablum, and it's just not really going to have the impact that a short, pithy, something that will enrage me will have, And I think that at our basis levels, we don't mind being enraged. In fact, we kind of find it cathartic to be like, yeah, I'm really mad about that. That means I'm doing something right, or I'm like on point, I'm over target, I'm being attacked or whatever. And I appreciate that about humans because it means that we're like paying attention and ready and willing to fight for ideas, but we got to focus on the positive too. And that's kind of my beat too. I'm trying to get the world to be more positive. Wish me luck, honestly, but it is hard. You're right. I know.
Well, you brought up your family, and I would be curious to know how that helps you achieve your goal. I think for me, one of the things I talk about a lot is that part of the reason homesteading and having a garden and just these simple things that seem like really mundane and not life-changing in any way actually are, is because the deeper I've gotten into the internet world and the information that was not in any way in my sphere of understanding when I was in the legacy news, is that I've realized that there's so much I'm never really going to know for sure. And the only things I'm going to know for sure are the things that are right outside my window or in my house, raising my kids. The cucumber or the squash that I grew, I can tell you what the soil was. If I go to the grocery store, now I've created a whole web of like, I have no idea where it came from. And so the more things you do that you're not connected to personally, and you can sort of see right in front of you, the less you know what you're participating in this world. And also, I just think also the unhappier you're frankly going to be. And more likely to be propagandized and used for a particular purpose without necessarily even knowing about it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, I just don't know this for sure. A lot of people will get on your case, in audiences and alternative media, if you're not just like, I know this terrible thing is going to happen, or what. I just don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know because what? Because how do I know where this information is coming from? I remember one time Scott Adams, a long time ago when I was watching him, he made a comment about how like, could the FBI co-opt him? Like, could they get in his chat, or could they use him for a particular purpose? He's like, of course they could. And I mean, I say the same thing. Like, it would be so naive of me to think that I couldn't be somehow hosed into one or particular agendas that somebody has. I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why my streams keep going. No, I'm sure it's my fault. It's the paper box again that I'm broadcasting from. But there's just no way you can know for sure, other than like, you have to just start living your own life. And I think part of these really hot topics that we're constantly online trying to learn about, I don't know if they necessarily serve the purpose of like helping us live our lives. I think they take a lot of attention away from that. And so speaking of living your life and wanting to ask the questions, because this is the way you can do it. If you join my editorial board, you get to go one-on-one with some of the most censored people on the internet. And you know what? Then you can ask Lydia about her own life and live yours by asking her what's going on, instead of having me ask the questions for you, in which case, you're just sitting there eating potato chips. Hopefully you're drinking AllisonWinePromo.com. But I'm going to take one question real fast from here. Will she ever go on Adam's podcast?
Probably not, because here's the thing, and I knew Adam was going to come up. So what happened?
Lydia, I don't know. I want to tell you up top, and everybody's watching, I do not know a lot of drama. So I'm not asking because I even know the drama. And if I ask a question that seems like I'm asking about drama, it's not, because I don't hardly know any of the drama. So I'm just putting that out there. I'm not a drama person. I don't like getting into the drama behind the internet. If you ask a question that's very drama and I spot it, I'm probably not going to ask it, just so everybody knows, because I just don't want to get into the personal stuff. All right.
Yep.
Go on, Lydia.
Completely understand. No one's going to believe me when I answer this, but there's actually not drama there that I participate in, that I'm willing to participate in. And here's why. Adam left the show because of a business decision. He chose to overlay a personal, subjective understanding on it. And unfortunately, that involved me. And I'm not going to take responsibility for it. I will tell you right now that he was very deeply hurt by what happened there, and I do feel bad. But at the end of the day, it was a personal decision. I didn't have a say in it, so it is what it is, unfortunately. I'm not going to go on his podcast because he said some really nasty things about me, and he's just made it pretty clear that he doesn't like me. I understand. So on we go. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I again, I'm reading some of the stuff in the chat. I'm like, okay, I obviously like there's stuff I'm missing, but about the Adam situation, I can only imagine that like some of the stuff I used to see in my old newsroom, if you were to amplify that and put it in alternative media, it's probably very similar, but there's less filtering, so you get to see it all sort of as raw as it can come out.
Yeah, so this was very much a workplace disagreement. And I know that those happen everywhere. I remember those happened at the hospital when I worked at the hospital. They happened everywhere I've ever worked. And I feel like everyone in the audience knows that too. And they're probably really glad that their workplace disagreements never got aired in front of like thousands of people, which honestly, good for them.
Millions.
Right. But I knew that was part of, par for the course when I joined. I was like, okay, whatever. It is what it is. But it's fine. I'm not interested in participating in drama, much like you, which is part of the reason that I wouldn't engage with him. I'm just not interested in it. It's just not productive, and I'm trying to do something positive here. So I'll just leave it behind.
Yeah, it's I'll just leave it there. I think you
no worries.
Leave it there. Okay. And this by Jay Butters, it's hard to not try not to get into gossip with this guest. Was she still there when the swatting kept happening?
I was there for all of it. Yeah,
Really?
which was exciting. It was actually really stressful. And I was like, man, we're trying to expand our family. We're trying to do positive things. This is incredibly stressful. Like, I feel a lot of pressure when I go into work, and to be like routed out of the studio when the cops come in. It's just like, wow. And I guess it's kind of continued since we've left, which is really tough. It needs to stop. Swatting people is 100% unacceptable. I would not do it to anyone, period, because it's such a dangerous thing to do, especially if people own pets. Like, give me a break. Even if you don't care about the people, you should at least care about their poor little dog that might be in danger.
Okay, you're going to have to explain what happens for those of us who are not as familiar. I mean, I know what swatting means, but I don't really quite understand exactly like what happens when that happens to you, like the details of it. And I'm fascinated by this because when a couple people that I've had on the show said this happened to them, my first reaction was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's got to be something weird you're doing in the back. Like, come on. I mean, no, why am I not? I mean, I don't want to say why am I not getting
Right.
now it's going to start happening to me, but like, really, it's just you're doing nothing, and then this stuff happens to you just because they're just a-holes out there who want to annoy you. I mean, okay, so run us through, like, well, give us a particular instance. You tell us what happened in one particular instance of getting swatted.
Okay,
and,
so
and what you think started that all. Like, where did that come from, or do you know?
Yeah, so I think Tim's explained 99% of this, if not 100%. He went through it pretty thoroughly after it happened. What happened was the police receive a phone call, right? And it's a very, very scary call. They're saying this is happening at this address. Typically, they'll be able to give the address of wherever they want to send the police or the SWAT team. And this is like their secret weapon. If they can figure out where you are, they can kind of SWAT you from anywhere, right? Which is not good, because then the police are in the mental state of being like, okay, something really, really bad is happening here. And that means we need to be on high alert. We need to be fully prepared. We might need to send a bomb squad, all kinds of crazy, like, really, really strong stuff that should never be taken lightly. My biggest issue with swatting, and this is something they're saying is happening more often with schools, people are calling in fake shooting threats. I have a serious issue with that, because it's a little bit like a fake sexual assault allegation, right? The people who are actually in need of that help now are second-rate citizens because of a fake allegation. And that was what kept happening with the Timcast compound. And one of the things they did too was involve a whole bunch of people. They involved like DC police, they involved the county police from 2 different counties, 2 different states. Yeah, there we go. And it was just like a cross institutional effort to try to get the Timcast staff, and they did not care that it put us in danger, because police are going in guns a-blazing, like super concerned that something bad might happen. And I understand their concern, but it makes everyone less safe. So that's basically what happens. And they can do it to people with absolutely no reason. They did it as a prank. Some guy ended up dying, if I recall correctly, because he was playing a game, I think, with somebody who did it to him, and it was completely apolitical, right? So Timcast is a little bit different because they are basically political creatures over there, which I understand there's a lot of unrest, but they can do it apolitically too. And you can have done absolutely nothing wrong. They can just think it's funny and be like, all right, I'm going to call a SWAT team on you. Crazy illegal. Really, really can't recommend.
Yeah, I mean, so did any of these people ever get arrested? Did they ever figure out I mean, why is there no consequence for this?
I know.
Terrible.
I know. I don't think that anything ever came of it. Certainly never came of it while we were there. But I do know that they had people working on it. Now, we've been seeing a lot of alphabet agencies come up short or be actively fill in the blank, anti-Catholic, anti-parent, all this other stuff. So it really like made me nervous about trusting them to try to take care of this stuff. But as far as I know, nothing ever came of it.
Remember, who was it who recently staged was it Gavin McGinnis?
Yeah, I heard something about that.
Do you think that, because this is what made me think of it, somebody's like, I bet he himself staged the swatting events. I'm guessing you would say no, he didn't.
Nope. He was in there in the show with me at the time. So unless he was, that would require a lot of coordination on his part. I couldn't see it happening. We had jilted former employees of the company who left on bad terms, and it probably, I'm willing to guess, was maybe one of them. Just company stuff. Again, this is like the company drama that you're seeing at a very high level now. And since you're doing slightly more important things than the regular, like plumber or whatever, something kind of important, but not as high in the public awareness.
So do you think with McGinnis's trick there that now people are going to start asking that question though, if it's a way to get attention, and now people are not going to,
yeah, and I think it's wise to ask that question because, like we were just talking about, there is this bias we have toward negativity, right? An empty studio after we got swatted, people were still really invested in the Timcast crew, so they were like super chatting, they were chatting, they did not leave. They're like really like invested in this, set of chairs, and I thought that was really funny. But I was also like, yeah, I could see why people would want to fake this, because it is a huge draw to be like, I got swatted live on stream. That's crazy. But I don't think that was the case at Timcast.
I gotta say, to fake that, I don't want to like go too low below the belt or anything on anyone, but dude, that's
kind of scummy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just weird, man. Like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night trying to fake something like that. I would be too freaked out. I mean, I just could not. I don't know what level of like dissociation from reality I would have to get to in order to do that. I'd have to be really drunk. Speaking of which,
speaking of drinking,
are you a wine drinker, Lydia?
I am sometimes. Not a big fan. I prefer non-Budweiser beer most of the time.
Okay. Well, I have to get a beer sponsor at some point, because I do also like beer. I'm an IPA drinker. I would never drink Bud Weiser. And I'm sorry if you think I'm anti-American before or now you think I am an American for not drinking because you don't like them, whatever. I always say I don't drink beer that comes out of me that's the same color as when it went in me.
That's fair. I like that.
It has to be darker going in. It cannot be light. And if you drink light beer, I apologize, but I think you're just less of a person. But if you drink Allison Wine Promo, I will think you're, I don't know, you're as extremist as the rest of us out here, because you drink extremist wine, extremist altitude wine anyway, is what I say. Okay. And as this little ad just came up to tell us, if you want a complimentary bottle of wine, sign up and you'll get that with the order at AllisonWinePromo.com. You get 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping. And actually, Lydia, since we have Larry Sharp as our mutual connection, he tells me I do a terrible job of promoting my wine and I really need to sell it. He usually cuts me off and finishes the ad for me and tells people that if you're already drinking wine, you have no excuse. You should go buy my wine, support my work, and drink wine that you're already drinking anyway. Plus, it's amazing wine. There's wine here. The Rogue Malbec comes from hand-harvested grapes. It's extremely limited production and one of the most remote regions of Argentina. Also, actually, all of these wines come from very remote regions. This one, 8,200 feet. That's an extremely high altitude wine.
Wow, yeah.
You know that those grapes are working hard for you, okay? Like I said, extremist altitude wine. If you're not an extremist, you're scared of being an extremist, you don't want to get swatted, start with wine. It's a great way to be an extremist and not get swatted, because I doubt anyone's going to send a SWAT team over to you for drinking Allison Wine Promo. I don't know. It may happen, but at this point, probably not. You can also go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, get some amazing USDA certified organic roasts. Right now, I'm doing a lot of the espresso because I got an espresso maker for Christmas for my parents. I make raw milk lattes with my espresso. I had a little bit of, what do I do? Vanilla extract and almond extract and raw cocoa powder. And I call it my amaretto mocha, raw milk amaretto mocha. Come on. So go get yourself some twinenginecoffee.com. You know that sounds good. It's way better than Starbucks. Why are you going to Starbucks anymore? Okay, every once in a while I do go to Starbucks, okay? I try not to, but I'm going to just be honest with you. If you're a tea drinker, you can get some tea. The Katura tea is tea made from the coffee fruit around the coffee bean. It's like a black tea. It's very good. I like to cold brew mine 24 hours. I put it out on the balcony, let the sun rays come in and brew it for me. And it's low caffeine, but high antioxidants. It's also a very good drink. So go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, AllisonWinePromo.com, and let's get back to Lydia. Okay, so what were we talking about? You have to be very drunk to do swatting. Okay. So what else would you have to be very drunk to do? Oh, yes. I probably have to be very drunk to have some involvement in a civil war. I would not want to fight in a civil war. So let's get back to this topic, since the topic at hand. When you're talking about the family, so I wanted to ask you about that. When you're talking about family related to your leaving the Timcast crew to work on cohering or not necessarily like moving towards this sort of civil war diatribe that you felt like was talked about a lot. How does family play a role in that? And do you feel like the folks who are, I don't, not to say this is like, don't want to make you go to a personal place here, but do you think that the folks who are constantly around the Timcast IRL night streams, like don't have enough relationship outside of that? I mean, do they need families, in other words? Like, are they do they need some connection to something real, and that's why that topic keeps coming up, that they're just a bunch of guys who work too hard and they're just completely inundated with this material and they just need to get a life? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there's a very workaholic tendency over there, which is great. I really respect and appreciate that. I always respect and appreciate my workaholic people, because that's what I was. There was a time when I had 3 different jobs and I was going to school. So I worked overnight jobs. I'd go right from there to class or to work the next day, either one of those other 2 jobs. And I was really lucky I could sleep at that job, but that was probably one of the only ways I could make that work. But I was constantly working. I felt like I wasn't at home. I traveled with a basket of clothes and a jar of peanut butter and a packet of oats, because that was like really quick food that you could eat on the go that didn't have to be refrigerated. That was actually not unhealthy for you. So I was looking for all that stuff. Made it happen. Fully respect the workaholic effect. But I do think it is really important. The reason that we moved up north was because we had the option to do so. We had like a place to live if we could come rent from family, which has been what we've been doing, which has been awesome. Really, really, really fun. But I think that my advice to everyone is that you need to get back to your roots. I think that we don't make cultural changes from the top down. I think this has to be done from the bottom up. And this has kind of been, I think I started to reach this conclusion as I was thinking about abortion, because I was like, there's no way to fix this problem with policies. You can't just say, all right, we're not going to do this anymore. That's done. Because you'll hear the argument of the coat hanger, this back alley conversation, which is, it was overblown at the time. And the guy who promoted it for NARAL admitted it, I think on his deathbed or thereabouts. He said, yes, it was certainly overblown, but I digress. You can only change the ideas about abortion by going from the bottom up and saying, it's good to have a family. It's good to get married. It's good to have, a marital relationship that has proper role. And I think that that was kind of our main impetus for moving up here. And I know that Tim has family over there, which is awesome. I do know that they take very few vacations, and maybe it would be good for them to get out and see more family, but it is what it is. At the same time, I think they're doing super important cultural work on the YouTubes, and I respect that fully. But yeah, I think that everybody should get back to their roots a little bit and try to start from the ground up. That was kind of our thinking for moving up here.
How's it going?
It's good. It's great. It's fun. I do like the historicity of the area. Really cool. Some of the oldest stuff in the country, which is awesome.
Yeah, Boston is really cool for that, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of history here. A lot of Revolutionary War stuff up here. Now, when we were down in Maryland, we had a lot of Civil War stuff. That was really cool too. But up here, we have all of the all of the Revolutionary War. There's a cemetery that has a lot of Revolutionary War soldiers and a lot of people who lived during that time buried there. So that was a lot of fun to go to.
Okay, Lydia, here's another question from Jay Butters. Did she ever imagine Tim's YouTube success would get that big, or was it all just serendipity?
It was kind of serendipitous because it was at the start of the 2020 election cycle. And to circle back to Adam, that was part of the reason for the business decision, from my understanding, was we had blown up hugely and there was a lot of question about the monetary decisions there. I won't get into that because that's not my personal thing, but that was a part of it. We blew up way bigger than we thought we would, which was awesome, but it came with a lot of kind of pitfalls, you know how it is. But I'm really proud of how they've done over there. Really excited for them for 2024. It's going to be fun to watch them then.
How did you meet?
So Tim Pool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I left a comment on one of his Instagram pictures of his little van that he had built for cross-country travel. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, if you come through Colorado, I'd love to meet you because that's where I am. And he was like, oh yeah, I have family out there right now. Would be cool. He was actually looking for someone to drive his van at the time. So he hit me up and he's like, would you like to maybe help me drive my van? And I was like, well, I just had shoulder surgery on my right shoulder, so I can't drive at all, not even myself. But here's an article about Jordan Peterson you might like. He's like, yes, I love this article. Send me articles. So I did that for 6 or 8 months. And then he's like, I'm starting this podcast. I need someone who really loves this stuff. I feel like you fit the bill. Come on out. We'll make it happen. As simple as that. A lot of fun. So I felt like I love the
How many
research.
followers did he have at the time? I mean, I can't imagine anyone having that experience with him now.
I was shocked that it was happening to me. I was like, am I being catfished? This is really weird. But I knew at the same time that he'd always been kind of unorthodox with the beanie and the traveling around the country and
Oh,
stuff. I don't know how
thank
many he
you.
had. Yeah.
Let's just talk. Can we talk about the beanie real fast?
Yeah.
I have to. So I cannot miss this opportunity. So has he always been wearing it? Is it just like, look, I wear blue glasses. I wear them because they're blue light blocking glasses. But now I feel like I'm stuck with the blue frames. I mean, maybe I could switch out at this point. I just don't know. People like hate them. They love them. I didn't mean for them to become part of an identity, but they just have. Like, was Tim Pool's beanie that, or was it like, because everyone wonders, like, is he just, he's nervous because he's bald or something, and he's always wearing a hat, like he's chilly all the time. Like, just could you give us just what you can tell us about the beanie? Is it magical? What's the deal?
It's not magical, and there's not just one. He has a whole bunch of them. They're super nice.
But they're the exact same one, right? Same
Yeah,
color and
I
everything.
think they're
Yeah.
pretty much, they're
Where do they
either,
can you say where they come from? Like, are they wool? Are they itchy? Are they fleece? What's the brand? Are they organic?
they're not too warm and they're not super fancy, because I think he started wearing them when he was still like out on the street with his microphone engaging with people. And I think that when he started to get big, he started to realize, oh, this is now my trademark, kind of like your blue glasses, right? But he kind of rolled with it. He was like, yes, this is perfect, because, I don't feel like being just another bald commentator on the internet like Joe Rogan or whoever. So I think that's why he's stuck with it. Not sure. I really talked about that with him, but yeah, it's not as complicated as people think. He just likes his beanie, and it
Do you
kind of
know if it's
brings on somebody.
cotton?
Probably. Yeah,
Or you've
because I
never
know that.
touched it?
No, I think they're just yeah, I think he looks for a certain kind. I think they're made in the US and stuff like that, cuz we really wanted to make some for like all the fans and put them into our shop or whatever. We could
Oh, right.
not find a maker in the US to do
Oh,
that for
really?
us. Yeah, it was really frustrating actually, cuz that would have been such a huge hit with the audience. Would have been a lot of fun to make happen, but couldn't do it.
I'm just very anal about, like, the kind of material that touches this part of my head, because I
Yeah.
get very itchy. And
Yeah.
so even though I'm very into wool because I like natural materials, I don't I've microplastics or the microfibers and stuff that get in the ocean. I used to be an environmental reporter. I do actually care about a lot of environmental issues. I think the ones that make the news, unfortunately, are often spun, and they are spun out of control to, like, use control, I guess, as a mechanism for people's behavior. But I do care about the environment. I think one of the things that's not talked about enough is, like, actually brands like REI and Patagonia, who are very vocal about climate change, for instance, they're one of the biggest polluters when it comes to, like, these micro fibers, basically these little microplastics that shed off of your, the fake materials into the water when you wash your clothes and everything. And it's a major problem. And so I really like natural, cotton or wool and stuff, but I just have a really hard time with it touching my head. I get very itchy. And so
Yeah.
I just was curious because it looks itchy to me from home.
Yeah, I think it must just be something that he's now super used to, just because he uses it all the time. It
Yeah.
probably bothers him sometimes, like socks kind of bother you at the top, where they're
Yeah.
like tight.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You get out
it's
of the
really
phase and
itchy.
you're like,
Yeah.
I'm in a flip-flop phase, but, like,
Yeah.
he can't get out of the phase. Yeah, I think Lydia answered this question. It's not the same beanie. He has a
No,
lot of
he's
beanies.
got a bunch. Yeah, he has plenty of money. He has a bunch of beanies. He's not a gross, stinky beanie.
Yeah, and then he should wear one with a propeller on it. That could be cool every once
That
in a
was
while.
pitched. Somebody sent him that one.
It
Unfortunately, he
was.
never did wear it. Sad, I know.
Dang. Okay. Brisville asks, is Tim a narcissist, or is he a guy that came from meager means, wanting to show, look what I've accomplished, wanting acceptance from people that are accomplished too?
That's a great question. That's like a very personal question. I will tell you right now that he's a very keen businessman. And you can tell that from his media empire. So it's got timcast.com. They got all kinds of cool authors like Shane Cashman. They're doing cool, fun stuff. Shane's over there writing books. They got Cassandra Fairbanks running the guests over there now. So they're making money moves, which is awesome. And you don't get that way by being a pushover. Certainly not a pushover. I won't call anyone names. I won't assign intentions to anybody, but he does know what he's doing when it comes to business, and more power to him, because we need that cultural difference. Um, he did come from kind of a humble background, and I do think that there's maybe an element of wanting to be like, I made it, I'm doing good things, Which honestly, as an American, I think that's a wonderful thing. I love the idea that anybody can do that. I think that's really neat. I especially really like when immigrants are able to do that. Good question though.
Rekieta's swatting. This is talking about Nick Rekieta. You're
Right.
familiar with him?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I can't believe how many people I know have been swatted. This is
I
so
know.
crazy. Came from an Egyptian number, unless I am mistaken. Failure to trust but verify on cop side is inexcusable considering possible mortal consequences. Also, life in prison for the prank caller could make some difference, in my humble opinion.
Definitely. I agree on that count for sure. But that would mean that you would have to be motivated to find that caller. And here's the problem with the Biden DOJ. I don't think that they have any interest in finding people who are targeting their political opponents. Are you kidding? They just indicted President Trump, former President Trump, who's now their leading political opposition. As far as I'm concerned, they're not trustworthy at all. Now, local police, I could see being on much better terms with. And ultimately, the people at Timcast did end up on good terms with them because it was important for us to know that they would respond if we called them and we were like, we need help over here. Maybe some crazy stalker came up the driveway and we actually really did need assistance. Like, we need to know that they're going to be there, you know? So it's hard, right? Really confusing, difficult to work with.
Yeah, it just seems so dangerous. I'm just shocked that this happens as much as it does. It's just nuts. Okay. Wells Mortensen, did Ian and Tim feel confident they've secured the Timcast operation against external forces other than physical, or did it only feel like they both felt secured? Not sure what that question's after.
So one of the things that my husband Andy was working on before we left was making sure that the website was safe from hacking and all this other stuff. And my husband is an IT pro, like a security expert. So he was really, really putting in the time with that. And they were making really good progress. So I'm very confident that they kept that up. Now they know exactly how important that is. And some of these lessons are hard. You got to learn them the hard way, but you will remember them once you get them. One of the cool things that they were working on too was Dan Bongino's parallel economy, which they, installed as a payment processor instead of like Stripe or PayPal. Very, very cool idea. I love the overarching idea of the parallel economy, and I absolutely love that Dan Bongino has a cool payment processing plan to do that.
Okay, let's go. Hang on one second. I'm going to pull you back over here. It's answering some questions on ROKFIN. If you're watching on ROKFIN, thanks for doing that over there. Rumble and Locals were all live on, and of course YouTube. But as many people know, I would love it if you would watch somewhere else.
Yes.
And not because I'm trying to evade censorship. No. I just prefer the other platforms. Wells Mortensen wants to make sure you know. Thanks for cooling the occasional outbursts of testosterone for us, the susceptible part of your audience, Lydia.
You're very welcome. I do the best I can.
Okay, DMC, do you feel anyone may be directing Tim to his Civil War narrative?
Absolutely don't think Tim's controlled by anyone. I think he's far too stubborn and contrarian for anything like that. I will tell you right now, like I mentioned earlier, that I think this might be an idea coming from the enemies of our country. And at the same time, it is a super popular narrative. So it could be one of those things like, hey, this gets a lot of clicks and likes. Maybe we can lean into this and kind of go with it. Not sure what the thinking is there.
You know, something I've wondered about that question, because I think dude, no one asked this question when I was in TV news. No one would go, do you think that person's controlled opposition? I mean, we just were not, that was just not on our radar whatsoever. And I get it a lot from the audience, you know, who's controlled, who's not controlled. I can't remember who was the guy who said basically that, like, I think it was a former Russian guy maybe, but like KGB or something, if I'm getting it right.
Bezmenov?
Who was it?
Yuri Bezmenov?
I don't know. It was the one who said the best opposition is their controlled opposition is the one who doesn't know they're controlled.
I think that might have been him.
Is that it? And so, I mean, the way I look at this is, you know, first off, everybody has blind spots and biases, and there's all kinds of reasons somebody may touch a particular topic and not touch another. It doesn't have to be as overt as like they're working for the CIA and they know they're getting their paycheck from them. You could have one other level too, where it's like, you know, like I said earlier, Scott Adams was like, could the FBI, you know, become somehow like infiltrated my family, or and I didn't know, and like, you know, whatever. Yeah, of course. Okay, or maybe it's even less so, and it's just that you're, you know, you're biased towards a particular topic in one favor versus another, and so you see things a certain way, and you know, you're I guess unaware that the information you've been receiving is filtered in a particular way in order to get you to think that way. I mean, in TV news, like, a lot of people think that the reporters are going into the conversations, into interviews and everything, and reports intending to brainwash Americans because they know that one thing is true, but they just like this world better. Like
Right.
but the vast majority of them, I mean, I never met a reporter who's like, oh yeah, I know better about pharmaceuticals, but because we get our paychecks from big pharma, we just have to make them look good. No, they were true believers in the material. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways that like we get the information we do, which is just why, you know, whether the person's overtly working for the CIA or they're, you know, me broadcasting out of a freaking paper box, you know, camera, just question everything, you know,
Yes.
question everybody, and just, you know, assume that everybody in some way is controlled by their biases or blind spots or whatever. And, you know, and then you don't have to worry about it. Just everybody is. So just, you know, there's no, well, like I said, whether it's an overt thing or the person like doesn't know their blind spots and they, you know, they're tripping over their own ego. I mean, what's the difference? You should still be skeptical of them. It doesn't matter whether they're getting a paycheck or not. It can the information or the misinformation can be just as dangerous. So question everything. Okay. The Veil. How in depth is the information Tim and Ian receive from various sources? How much of this can you talk about?
So I do know that for the Timcast site, our reporters would go and talk to people like on the ground. They would go and do their due diligence and go really talk to primary sources. Now, you're not always able to do that. And I know that sometimes, you know, all of us are at risk of just glossing over something and being like, oh, I saw this in a headline. Sometimes that's a risk. It's much better to kind of encourage people to really read deeply and to find different sources. Usually on the show, they will have gone through, like, Tim will go through, like, I used to pull up a bunch of different stories before the show because that's part of my role as a producer. And I would have like 4 different stories from the same source. And he's like, get different sources. You know, I want different perspectives on this. And I was like, of course. Yeah, I just pulled them all up because I wanted to see if you were interested in them in the first place. But yeah, so they're really good about diversifying their sources. And then, of course, because they have timcast.com and they have those reporters, they do get the inside scoop on some of this stuff, which I think is great. It's exactly what we need and what we're looking for.
When I get a $50 super chat from my husband, I have to read it. Otherwise, there will be marital discord. Allison Morrow, hire a better technical director to keep your stream from crashing. Thank you. I will use this $50 to do so. Okay, let's go back over to locals, shall we? So the Veil keeps asking, when I watched Timcast, I wondered if Tim tries to play the common sense, clear-headed role or if everything is scripted.
Nothing scripted. Nothing scripted. And Tim is fantastic about carrying on a conversation and reading the article and asking questions. He's really, really very good at this. This is certainly like his calling in life, is to kind of run this kind of show and have these kind of conversations. So honestly, very gifted in that front. No, nothing's scripted. He does try to play the middle ground and try to keep everybody kind of balanced.
Did you ever feel not welcome there? Because I always saw you holding down the fort.
I did not. No, but what I was doing was working, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, you're not out there doing other stuff with everybody." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm working. I come in and I do my work."
Yeah.
This is part of being professional. Like, you come in and you do your time, and I was more than happy to engage with people who would come and hang out in the studio with me, for example, but usually I was like really, really big on separating work life from personal life, right? So you got to have your home life, and you got to make sure you get all your errands done and do all your adult chores and then go into work and try to keep them separate. Makes it easier.
Where are you headed with your future? You've also talked about that quite a bit, but would you like to add anything else
So
that you
right now,
haven't said?
so right now I'm just having conversations with people much like this, and it's a lot of fun. Really enjoying it. I have a lot of really fun people I've talked to, including Benjamin Boyce, who's also over on the West Coast. Really love hearing voices from the West Coast because I feel like we don't get to hear enough conservatives out of there. So far, I'm just going to keep uploading stuff to my YouTube channel every single day and make sure that, or every single weekday, I should say, and try and make sure that we keep having these conversations. I think that's kind of how we help fix some of these problems.
Okay. Like him or hate him, I have learned Tim is Tim, Ricka Height says.
True.
Not the most likable guy, but a lot of good content. Didn't like Tim all that much, but he grew on me. He has been moving to the right for a while, which apparently has alienated his former left followers. As far as Lydia goes, I recognize her, but was not on the channel to hear a lot of her commentary. Usually a public move from one of these publicly accessible video channels seems to always have a disgruntled one and one that doesn't seem to care. Would be interested in her comments with specifics on why. She just has to be prepared for pushback.
He is correct, entirely correct. Tim is high in disagreeability, I think, which I think is one of the things that's made him so good at business. And there is a place in the world for people who are not agreeable. Like some of my biggest arguments with women, conservative women, is that we're too nice, too agreeable. So I really cherish my kind of disagreeable, somewhat, rough and ready ladies who are willing to just be like, no, I don't like the way things are going in society and I really want to do something about it. So in order to make a change in the world, I think you kind of have to be disagreeable. I don't remember the rest of his question. It kind of disappeared. There's a lot there.
Yeah, usually a public move from one of these publicly accessible video channels seems to always have a disgruntled one and a one that doesn't seem to care. Yeah. Would be interested in her comments with specifics on why. She just has to be prepared for pushback.
Yeah, so what happened with Adam was that he was disgruntled, unfortunately, and decided, like I said earlier, to pull me into it. But I have wished nothing but the best for Adam, and I wish him nothing but healing, because he does still seem to be upset over it. And it's been a couple of years now, so even at the time I was like, he's upset, and I don't think that's what this is about. But again, still wish everybody at Timcast the best. So,
okay, Kenny Eagle. What? Okay, Tim does seem intense, as some of his regular guests over the last couple of years. Was that intensity always on, even after the camera stopped?
Yeah, just kind of disagreeable. He kind of come over and like kind of tersely tell me what needed me to do, which was fine. Like from a boss, it's exactly what you need. I'm like, yeah, tell me exactly what you want me to do, and I'll do it. Don't sugarcoat it.
Speaking of this, since James O'Keefe has been, in the news quite a bit for this disagreeable attitude that you're bringing up, do you have any hot takes on that situation?
I don't have any hot takes. I think people are right about him maybe being a difficult person to work with, but because I didn't work with him personally, I really don't have like a personal stance. I thought he was super nice and funny when I met him. It was pretty clear that he was really interested in like singing and dancing. And I know that he was planning to get married at one point, which ended up kind of falling apart, unfortunately. So there's hardship there too. There is for everyone. But like I said, people who are movers and shakers tend to be kind of disagreeable and have this penchant for sometimes being unpleasant. That's just a thing that happens. It is what it is.
Well, I've worked for a lot of tough personalities.
You would know. Yeah, you would know.
While I don't think that it's like normal to lose your cool, like, I don't think that's as good management skills. I also can understand that a person who signs up for a particular job is probably going to have a kind of personality that would predispose them to acting certain ways. And like Glenn Greenwald said once about Julian Assange, who would do what Julian Assange has done? I mean, not some nice guy that just wants to be liked by everybody. You're going to have somebody who's, probably rough on the edges. And so, yeah, he gets criticism for being an a-hole, but like, what do you expect? I mean, who's going to do that? Well, and so, I can understand, and it not just necessarily meaning that you're predisposed to, but also I bet the job also intensifies that and makes it a little bit more intense to deal with. So, I don't know, that was stuff I didn't think was weird. I will tell everybody, there's a considerable amount of people watching right now. Thanks to Lydia for bringing the audience. Maybe I'll make us bigger here, so we're not just looking like the tiny little boxes. I did have Ivory Hecker on.
She's great.
Well, so she said something really interesting the last time that she was on. She's been on a few times. The last time we were talking about the Project Veritas meltdown, and she said that she parted ways with them because I believe it was oh my gosh, it was, I think it was, well, there was, because I can't remember if it was Turning Point or CPAC. I think it was Turning Point conference. She's basically going on the road with them to talk to these conservative groups about what happened with her at Fox. And one of the sponsors of the event was Fox Corp. And they basically booted her from the speaking list because they didn't want her to crap talk the sponsor. And so she was like, wait a second. Okay, hang on a second. Project Veritas helped me get out of my, get out of this situation of censorship. And now they're censoring me. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Now that I have a problem with, like, I don't care if you're kind of a jerk to work with, but if you act like you're about, you're all about like questioning power and everything, but there's certain powerful people that you're like, no, because we don't want to lose our connections to these people, then that's I don't like that very much. So I that was the thing I took away when she said that. I was like, dang, I didn't know that kind of stuff. But of course I would assume that's that kind of thing. Everybody's, I guess, working for somebody when you get to that level. I mean, that's a problem with getting that big. One of the nice things about broadcasting out of a paper box is that I'm not worried about somebody pulling like $1 million worth of support because I've never had that.
Right.
But when you have a huge operation with lots of employees and everything, and, you're trying to get your name out on Fox News Channel on a regular basis, having somebody go on there and say Fox Corp is controlling the information that you see in order to favor big pharma or whatever, yeah, I mean, then I think that's problematic. And so that was one thing that I was like, okay, that's not great. I do think sometimes when these big stories come out, and I've had my audience hold me accountable to this too, and I've appreciated it. That like the stuff that we often are arguing about is like what we're allowed to argue about, but there's like usually a third or a fourth option out there that we're not discussing, and maybe that's hidden from view, and we're arguing about this superficial stuff like James O'Keefe being a jerk or something to work for, because that's the safer thing to talk about rather than Project Veritas telling Ivory Hecker that she can't talk bad about Fox Corp.
Yeah, so there's a big between someone being disagreeable on an individual level and a company being kind of controlling when it comes to what you can say and do. The former is much more understandable to me. People need to be disagreeable. Somebody was saying earlier, they're like, she needs to be prepared for pushback. Of course, everyone needs to be prepared for pushback. In fact, if you're not, I feel like you probably shouldn't be in this space. It's kind of one of the requirements of the job. That's kind of what James O'Keefe was, and his disagreeability helped him a lot in that space. Same goes for Tim. Yeah, where it's not cool, you're right, is when companies are kind of trying to censor people. Don't love that.
Okay. How did people like Seamus feel about their role?
Seamus. So we love Seamus.
Oh, Seamus, sorry.
Yeah. Seamus is awesome. He was always a wonderful, willing player. He's so pleasant, so kind to be around. He took a lot of joking and ribbing. He talked frequently about his faith. I'm optimistic that he will be back on Timcast before you know it. But he being like second chair after Ian is kind of challenging. Like there's really only one. So you can't bring too many people on. Too many voices just tends to get overwhelming and chaotic. So it's kind of like switch out between Luke and Seamus over time, especially since Luke's in Florida for a while.
Lydia, what's it really like herding cats?
This was actually my description in Slack for a long time. I called myself the resident cat herder because I was coordinating all the guests, and that means all their travel and all of their requests and all that good stuff. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't easy, but I learned a lot about how to work with people, and I love everyone in that space, so it was really neat.
Okay, last question over at Locals. Keep in mind the left has threatened civil war for some time and said if Trump won in 2020, there would be a civil war. The left uses it to call the right fascist, racist, and threaten the term civil war as a scare tactic. What I rarely heard was any logical definition of how anyone saw a civil war happening. It's an Alinsky rule for radicals to keep the opponent in anxiety. Tim overused the term, and at least once I recall him saying it was not going to be necessarily a shooting conflict. We'll be interested in how Lydia sees this stalemate concluding or if she wants it to.
I do. I absolutely do. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't see it being a shooting conflict either. Now, Tim was talking about the Spanish Civil War because the American Civil War was really weird, right? We had a geographical division where we were fighting literally across state lines. Okay. So I think that's what he means when he says it's not going to look like the first American Civil War. I think he's right about that, whatever happens. Like I said earlier, though, I think what's probably going to happen is not going to be a war. I think it's going to be a sorting by political affiliation. People who really want more of what DeSantis has to offer are going to end up in Florida. People who like Newsom, very few, from my understanding, are going to end up over in California, which I think is great. Yeah, go on.
Oh, and I wanted to talk to you in a second. I'll bring it up real fast, and then I'm going to let you go because I know you're a busy lady. About what just happened in Washington State. Speaking of Newsom, because we just follow California
Right.
and do whatever they do, whether it's cars or kids or whatnot. But question from Wells Mortensen: what trait is common for a Fox and Friends producer, which is what I used to do too before I was a reporter, and a Timcast IRL one? What unites you ladies job wise? What do you think it makes for a producer personality?
I think you have to be willing to take some of the blunt personalities you run into. I think that's
Yeah.
really important. You can't be thin-skinned when you have to work with people who are used to being front and center and people who are used to having it their own way. I don't know about you. My role as a producer was a little bit different because I was wearing a bunch of different hats. I was wearing the guest coordination and a lot of the background, holding down the fort, like somebody mentioned earlier, stuff too. But I don't know. What do you think? What's the most important character trait that played a role in your role?
I do agree with you that I think being able to manage personalities is a huge part of that job. It honestly was one of the things I didn't like about it, and probably one of the reasons that I quit producing was because I just didn't want to be a babysitter.
Mm.
I was kind of I never liked babysitting, frankly. I like my kids, but I'm not like huge like just want to herd cats, I guess. That's just not my I don't know. I like being I like being kind of on my own, and I also like being a mile deep and an inch wide on a topic versus the opposite, which is a producer often is gaining kind of like shallow understandings of everything because they have to oversee like the whole show. At least that's how it is in TV news. You're producing an hour usually, so you're kind of up to speed on a little bit about everything. And I like to be very deep on a particular topic, and maybe that means I'm going to be ignorant of a lot of other stuff that's out there, but at least I know one thing really well. That's just my personality. So I don't think I liked being in everyone's business or needing to keep things on track. I was like, this feels like babysitting. It feels like and babysitting adults with, like you said, I mean, depending on where you are in my business, for instance, one of the things I had to do was the research basically for the anchors on Fox and Friends, and you had to leave these little cards for them overnight because they would come in usually earlier, and when they're in hair and makeup, they would read your cards and your packets and stuff. And one time I took my packets home with me because I don't know, I was sleep deprived,
Oh
whatever. I took the
no.
cards and packets home. So they got in and my cards and packets were not there. And wow, yeah, I got in huge trouble because, well, I won't name names, but I'll just say one of the females actually one of the women
Mm.
was not happy, and it wasn't even like, I don't remember it being a segment that was particularly complicated. But anyway, I was like, I don't need to be screamed at by these people. Like, this is not, this just isn't interesting and fun for me anymore. So that
Yeah.
was like one of the reasons I didn't like it. But I do think, yeah, in order to be good at it, you have to be able to handle that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I actually completely agree with you because I love the philosophical stuff. I love talking about the evergreen topics, like the really deep stuff, like where did this come from? Where is it going? How do we tackle it at the root? I don't just want to talk about the headlines from yesterday. I want to really focus in on stuff. Completely agree on that one.
Um, Also, one other thing too is one of the reasons I actually wanted to be a producer and I didn't want to be a reporter and still have issues with is that I wanted to be behind the scenes. I don't really enjoy being like the front person for anything. It's not I don't actually am kind of a private person. I don't love the attention. In fact, when I started in TV, I used my middle name. Morrow was my middle name, not my last name, but I used it for privacy and security reasons because I
Smart.
just didn't want people to know who I was. I didn't want you to be able to find me. I don't know. The publicity in some ways like really freaks me out. I don't really like that. So I don't like doing my makeup, honestly. And times I don't. I used to get in trouble for that a lot in TV news. Just the show of it all. So I think being a producer, like if you're kind of somebody who, you don't mind, someone else getting the spotlight for a lot of the hard work you've done. Because that's, I think, a producer does a lot of hard work and doesn't get a lot of the credit for it.
Yes, entirely correct. I agree with you. I actually didn't expect to have a place, like a speaking role in the show. I was kind of surprised when I ended up getting a camera early on. I was like, okay. But Tim was like, yeah, we want to try to get some of the ladies in our audience, right? And I was like, well, sure. Yeah, of course. That makes sense too. So yeah, same boat. I was happy to just be like, hey, everything's going well. Who cares who gets the credit, right? We'll just go with it.
Okay, before we wrap, Lydia, I just have to tell everybody, I'm going to probably try to see if Brandy or somebody else wants to come on. Brandy Cruz, former TV reporter in Seattle, doing a great job on her own now. So she's talking about this bill 5599 passing in Washington. Not wanting your child to get gender transition care is now just as bad as physical abuse in Washington state and means the government can hide your kid from you. If not affirming your minor's desired gender as abuse, what's next? Removal from home. And basically, she says it gives shelters the power to hide your kids from you if you don't support their desire for gender care. You said that this follows California. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so actually one of the things I've been super interested in for a while now has been a gentleman named appropriately Scott Wiener. He is a representative, I think from San Francisco, and he fits the bill of a wiener because holy cow, he has promoted the worst bills. Like he promoted, bills that are so graphic I can't even explain them, that are in connection to children, like actual minors, and things that are clearly designed to give the LGBTQ rainbow more protection from the law. And he was the one, it was his bill that removed the disciplinary action for people who don't tell their partners that they have AIDS, because there is that LGBTQ association with people who have AIDS. He's like, well, this discriminates against, for example, gay men. He is the subject of a fascinating article by Abigail Schreier called Predator's Paradise in City Journal that I link everywhere I see him comment, and he constantly gets ratioed on Twitter because people are like, you are a terrible person doing terrible things. And I'm glad he gets called out for it. And he's behind so many of these bills that are putting children at risk. And I believe he was the one behind a lot of this legislation about keeping kids away from their parents if they do decide to leave or try to flee to California for gender affirming care protection or whatever. So really, really bad precedent. I forget who said it initially, but California is just the US in a few years, unfortunately. And it sounds like Washington is tracking closely with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some other firearms issue that's come out that I gotta do some video on too, because it's I think that's a big one. I mean, they've been cracking down, I guess, on the Second Amendment in Washington for a while, but I think the latest one is pretty bad. Lydia, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks everybody for watching. I will say this: I'm gonna rethink my strategy because it's obvious that if you have somebody people want to hear from, you can still get a significant amount of views on YouTube. Maybe not necessarily what I used to, but there's a lot of people who tuned in to hear what you had to say. So maybe I need to have a Lydia every week or something. I don't know.
Spicy headlines. You need a spicy title, and then you need like a
disagreeable personality.
Guest. Yes, exactly, that too. That doesn't hurt. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Allison.
Yeah, and you all should know that if you were tuning into the first stream when we had our implosion and Lydia was just kind of staring at the camera and not sure what was going on, she was so nice afterwards about everything. Some people could get annoyed and they're like, I don't have time. And she made herself available. She did not lose her cool. She was total 100% A-rate OG producer material. And that was off camera behind the scenes when there was nobody watching. She just know that about her. She was very kind and magnanimous about the whole thing. So thank you, Lydia.
I empathize with the tech issues. I know what it's like for sure.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. I will see you guys over. Hopefully you'll, oh wait, hang on. There was one super chat that, let's just go back in a second. Just make sure I got, was that the $50? Oh, here. Okay. I just have to throw this one in. Why does Tim have the crossed flintlock pistol and samurai sword on the wall behind him pointed down?
Don't ask me. That was not a decorating decision on my part. In fact, every time I see it now, I'm like, why is that there? I don't understand. He loves it. I would never take it from him. Good for him. Doesn't make sense.
Had to get that question in. Okay, yeah. We're really going now, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. See you next time.